A collection of ghost stories. Volume 1. A novel by Neil Wesson. Chapter 15. The Stairway. In a tastefully furnished first-floor room, Henry Sullivan sat at a writing desk. He checked through a large ledger to see who would be calling on him that day. The clock on the mantelpiece was striking 11 o'clock as Sullivan looked out of the window at the bustling city below. The first of today's business would be calling on him shortly. A single oil lamp illuminated the room. This was placed on the top of his desk. It burned to serve only one purpose, to aid with the reading of the assorted papers piled up neatly on the desk. The only entrance to the room was a door situated at the top of a flight of stairs. The stairway was cold and unfurnished, no carpet lay on the floor, no banister rail protruded from the wall. It was winter outside, but even in the balmy days of summer, those who had the misfortune to tread the steps up to that room would feel a chill on the back of their neck. The fortunate ones would also have the experience on the return journey back down the stairs, just though the fortunate ones. Outside the front door of the Whitestone property, times were hard in the city of Hull in the year 1885. Men returning from the Crimea, of which there were many, found it difficult to fit back into civilian life. Jobs for the veteran soldiers were hard to come by. The docks thrived with cargo coming and going from all parts of the world. The port was a vital link to the empire. In the west of the city, seagulls hovered above the fish docks waiting for a tasty morsel to come their way, while on the pier, boxloads of fruit were being unpacked for the Hummer Street market. As the dockers worked, the prostitutes watched from the doorways of the many pubs, knowing that for many of the men, today was payday. A busy night ensued. A middle-aged woman, shabby in appearance, stepped off top flight of the staircase and stood outside Mr. Sullivan's door. She paused outside the door, waiting a moment to compose herself. With a deep breath, she knocked on the door. For a moment nothing happened, then she felt something on the back of her neck. It was icy cold. Drawing in a short, sharp breath, she turned, but no one was there. The creak of the door opening took her attention back to the purpose of her visit. "Come in, Mrs. Streetwater," said Sullivan, his body framed in the doorway. The women entered the room and stood in its center. Sullivan closed the door behind her. As the catch clicked shut, Mrs. Streetwater shivered. Sullivan eyed her from head to toe, looking for any evidence of new garments on her person. It was clear to him that she possessed none. On every visit she had worn the same old filthy clothes. Sullivan sat at his desk and consulted his book. Not that he had to, he knew the exact amount owing. "You now owe 14 shillings, Mrs. Streetwater. Do you have this week's payment?" She said nothing. "Well, I'm waiting." He sneered. "No, sir. I don't." "Well, what am I going to do with you?" Again she remained silent. She had heard the tales of his late payers. Some were never seen again. "Well?" He shouted at her. "Sorry, sir. It was my youngest, Albert. I had to take him to the docks." His breathing was. Sullivan interrupted her. "I'm not interested in your petty domestic affairs," he yelled, "but I am not a monster despite what some people say. You have until next week. 2 weeks owing next week, or I will not be so understanding." "Thank you, sir." She turned towards the door. Sullivan jumped out of his chair and opened it for her. She passed through the door, her body as stiff and tense as a stone column. She was still afraid of what he could do to her before she made it out of the front door. He watched her closely as she passed him, then slowly descend down the stairs. As she opened the front door onto the street, she breathed again. Then out of the corner of her eye she caught sight of something that made her run out of the house in blind terror. At the bottom of the stairs there was an internal door. It had swung open, and there, standing in the kitchen, was a dwarf of a man wearing a blood-stained overall, while in his hand he carried a meat cleaver. A disfiguring scar ran down the left-hand side of his face, from the forehead down over the eye, stopping at the line of the jawbone. He smiled at the women's response. Stepping out into the hall, he closed the front door. "Be ready, soon," said his master's voice from the top of the stairs. "It'll be the next one in, with a bit of luck." Accompanied by a laugh, the dwarf disappeared back into the kitchen. In the street outside the Whitestone house, a one-armed man paused at the door. He took one last drag on his cigarette, flicked the stub into the road central gutter before looking round. After that final turn of his head, he opened the door and entered the house. Slowly he climbed the stairway. Halfway up he felt a pressure building on his chest. Cold engulfed him. He felt cold now, and his legs wouldn't go another step upward. It was as though an invisible force was trying to stop him going any further. Since he had returned from military service, he had heard voices in his head, but never had he experienced something as strange as this. Go back," said a voice deep inside his head. "Heed my words, for I am Ian Foreman." It continued. The voices had started again. His head hurt. Something inside his skull was beating like hammer on anvil. Compassing himself, he continued up the stairs, and once at the top knocked on the door. With a creak the door opened. "Mr. Jackson, come in," As the ex-army man passed through into the room, his wake emitted a smell which the nostrils of Sullivan picked up at once, though he didn't mention it, not yet. Slowly he returned to his seat and consulted his book. Now let me see. Ben Jackson looked at the floor as Sullivan read out his notes. You borrowed 3 guineas 1 month ago. This was to procure lodgings for yourself and tide you over while you sort out employment, is that correct? Silence was Jackson's only reply. Since then I have not seen a penny piece of my monies in return. Do you have employment, sir? Again Jackson said nothing. Well? Sullivan raised his voice. No, sir. I have not. I have only had enough money to eat the smallest amounts of scraps. Really? It would appear that you have enough, sir, to purchase smoking tobacco and matches. Is this a justified use for my money? No, sir. The loan is called in, sir. You will have the money to me by the end of the day. That's impossible, sir. I need more time to find a. I have given plenty of time due to your being one of Her Majesty's men-at-arms. Normally I would take action after only 1 missed payment. You have had 3, sir, 3. I will try, sir. Tonight, I will have it. Very well. Agreed Sullivan. By the way, Ben was pushing his luck, but for his own sake he had to know. He asked the question. That to him seemed more important than the money owed. Who is Ian Foreman? Foreman, what makes you ask that? Sullivan asked. It was just a name that I heard. He was a man who couldn't pay his debts. Sullivan replied in an offhand tone. He crossed over to the door and opened it for Jackson. Tonight, no later than 6 o'clock. As Jackson passed, Sullivan lifted up a walking stick from the stand next to the door. This particular stick was only used for special purposes as it was weighted with a lead insert. Raising it above his head to achieve maximum velocity, he brought it down on the back of Jackson's neck. Jackson lost consciousness as soon as the contact was made. His limp body rolled down the stairs, landing at the bottom in a twisted heap. The interior door to the kitchen opened. There in the doorway, cleaver in hand, stood the dwarf, an acidic smile on his face. The smile turned to a look of determination as he brought the cleaver down, shearing Jackson's head from his body. Clean that up, then make the usual arrangements. Sullivan ordered the little man. He returned to his office, where he sat down at the desk and began to count the day's takings. The interest from his loans plus the trade with the local research hospital was reaping in quite a tidy sum. If his clients couldn't pay with money, then the sale of their cadaver more than covered the amounts of the loan. At 6:30 he had finished for the day. As he placed the pile of bills and coins into the safe, he began to feel uneasy. A sense of being watched came over him. A rubbing sound was coming from the door to the stairs. Slowly he crossed the room as quickly as he could, then opened the door. No one was there. It was dark now. He closed and locked the safe, then lit a candle. After extinguishing the gas lamp, he set off down the stairway, the candle in his hand lighting the way. Halfway down the stairs the flame blew out. This left him in almost total darkness. He took out the box of matches from his pocket and struck one of them. The flame was warm. He could feel the heat on his face. Lighting the candle once more, he took another step down the stairs, then stopped. What he thought was approximately 7 steps down at the bottom of the stairway, he could see the figure of a man looking up at him. The flame from the candle was obscuring his view, so he moved it to one side. Who is it? Who's there? He asked, but no one answered his call. Each time he took a step down, the figure moved down a step too. After 4 or 5 times he realized that he should have been at the bottom of the stairway, but he wasn't. It went on. Turning to face upward back toward his office, he no longer could see his office door, only stairs. Turning back to face the apparition, he stared at the almost translucent figure. I know you, he said, walking down the stairs toward it. I know you, you're that no good Ian Foreman. Then it dawned on him, Foreman had been one of his victims. Ian Foreman was dead, murdered by him and his cook. The specter smiled at Sullivan, then slowly disappeared, leaving him there. He ran down toward the front door, but it never came. On and on he went until he was out of breath. He sat down on the stairs, his head in his hands, that candle beside him, the stairs with no end or beginning, no top or bottom. The end.